Hi, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. My name is Avanti Sane, and today I will be talking to you about how to price and package a new product based on a new technology into a new market. A quick note, this session is based on a B2B perspective since my experience stems from that, but these learnings could definitely be applied to a B2C scenario too. So let's get started. Who am I? So, a little bit about myself. By education, I'm a computer engineer and I've done my MBA in marketing. I started my career in a bunch of startups, all of which were acquired by software giants. I have been fortunate enough to manage products in many different and emerging technologies. And lastly, like I mentioned before, I have worked primarily on B2B software. So let's jump straight in. As all of you would probably agree, product management can be a challenging discipline. And these challenges get exacerbated when you have to launch a completely new solution in uncharted territory. In such a scenario, pricing and packaging becomes an even bigger challenge. How do you know what the value of your product is, and hence, what do you charge the customer for it? To answer these questions and to help you better understand and apply my learnings, I thought we could ground this session with an imaginary case study. So, for the sake of this session, let's suppose that the product we are bringing to market is a platform to simplify leveraging all your data for machine learning purposes. It is a new product, by which I mean it's attempting to solve the data access problem for machine learning, where a business can pull in all its data, which is spread all over or siloed. It is also new technology because machine learning, as we all know, is a new and evolving space. Let's also assume we are using other cutting edge techniques like blockchain, for example. This basically means that as we navigate this space, there may be many unknowns, no subject matter experts, and in some cases, your R&D team is also learning as you're going along. New market. Now, this can be seen in two ways. Number one, either it's a complete blue ocean, which is basically a term for a market which no one has ever started solving for yet. So that means there are no established players to benchmark price and strategy against, no established industry standards or definitions, or in other words, Gartner doesn't have a quadrant for it yet. Number two, it may also be a relatively new space, but a completely new market for your company. Either way, it's a new space. Before we get into pricing and packaging solving framework, I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about the timing of this effort. So this is a rough timeline of new product introduction. And typically folks don't deal with pricing until the very last step, which is commercialization. But when you're dealing with so many unknowns, I would recommend thinking about pricing much earlier in the process. Almost somewhere between idea screening and concept development testing. Why, you ask? Well, let me share a small anecdote. A few years ago, when I was working on a product based on the Internet of Things, we as a team had come up with some product features and vision. And when we presented it to our executive, he said, and I quote, "This is excellent. Now go back and bring me something someone will actually pay for." Now, this was a very important lesson for me, not just from a PM perspective, which is what should I build, but also from a will they buy it perspective. Just because it's cool and different and solves a pain point doesn't necessarily mean it will compel someone to pull out their credit card. It's similar to the difference between selling a vitamin and selling medicine. People will actively pay for a medicine, but a vitamin may be a nice to have. The reason I make this point is you want to make sure when you're pricing, you're not pricing for a vitamin, and you need time to figure that out. So give yourself a runway by starting early and then use it. This will also give you two other benefits. So number one, you don't want to be rushed into a pricing model decision at the far end when the product is ready and the business is pressurizing you to launch. And number two, in larger companies, sometimes it is imperative that you show some kind of a business justification in terms of revenue generation. So that's step 4 in this slide. And having some thoughts on pricing mechanisms can help you build a more educated and stronger business case. Now, choose your levers wisely. So coming back to our pricing selection framework, the first thing you need to figure out is what are the levers or knobs which the price will be based on. And in the absence of any competitive benchmarks or industry data, a good approach is to lead with first principles. Think about what is the fundamental value your product provides to the customer, and then temper it with its perceived value. So let me explain that a little more. So for our case study, say the basic value we provide is the ability to ingest data into the platform to pool it. But we may realize after conversations with customers that although they do care about ingestion, they care more about the kinds of data that the platform can support. So things like sensor data, video data, statistical data, what have you. Once you identify the value, the next step is to pick the lever itself. And remember, when you pick this lever or whatever lever you pick, the customer will always try to optimize for it. So in our case study, some options for levers could be, starting with something like just simple volume. So you could charge them X dollars for a GB or a TB. Now say that we also know that the customers care more about diversity. We could probably come up with some options there too. So either a volume data split by diversity or a combination of the two. Either way, the message to the customer becomes clear. The more data or different kinds of data you use, the more we will charge you. Now, the customer may try to limit their spend by being selective about how much data they ingest into the platform, which in the larger scheme of things may limit them from truly realizing the full potential of this platform, which is to drive machine learning, which gets better with more data. So it is important to think of these catch-22 situations as you pick levers. Now, another option could be to keep it very simple. Instead of thinking up of a whole new lever, just hang your pricing hat on a known complementary lever. It could be a common lever used by, say, a company in their existing products. So let's say for the sake of this case study, our company typically prices products based on percentage of compute used. We could also get creative and maybe piggyback on top of a related product line. So say, for example, the company sells a storage hardware stack or a data processing software, which is kind of like a sister concern. You could offer your product on top of it for an additional X%. So those are other ways of thinking about it. Now, for our case study, let's say that we go for the simplest option. We pick a known lever like percentage compute used to move data in and out of the platform. Now that we have an idea of which lever we are using, we need to test it against our short-term and long-term strategy and make sure it comes through to avoid any expensive turnarounds in the future. For our case study, some short-term advantages could be that the lever is simple and known. So that means more pilots, which probably means more conversions and more references. And as you know, in B2B, a customer reference is everything. From a longer-term perspective, we need to make sure that the lever can evolve into a more sophisticated model if required to capture more value. It should also be able to morph well to accommodate future business decisions, like, say, making industry-specific pricing and bundles, or the ability to drag other products from your portfolio. Is the customer always right? Now, sometimes with newer technologies, customer input may be great for pain point validation, but not necessarily for solution validation. And this is because the customer may have limited imagination and foresight into what a good solution looks like. And this happens primarily because they don't fully understand the impact of the new technology well enough. However, when it comes to pricing and packaging for newer products, customer input is absolutely invaluable. I highly recommend engaging in as much qualitative and quantitative discussions as you can have on this topic. Now, these conversations can throw light on valuable decision points like main drivers. Do they want a CapEx model or an OpEx model? Frequency of pricing, etc. Sometimes they may outrightly tell you that there is a particular model that they prefer based on how their business runs. In our example, let's suppose we got a great pair of inputs like they prefer OpEx and they prefer flexibility, which helped us zone down on an as-a-service model, but we got ambiguous results on the time period. That's okay. At least this takes us one step closer to a final model. Now, this is where we bring in the sales input. Now, PMs and sales typically share a very interesting relationship. But when it comes to conquering new frontiers, their input can mean the difference between a successful product versus dead on arrival. Sales can not only help provide a reality check on your overall pitch and strategy, but also help vet your pricing model. So let's say we run a proposal from the previous slide by sales of doing us as a service model. We may learn that the sales folks usually do not prefer as a service model because it delays their compensation. They prefer prepaid models where they realize their comp faster, which incentivizes them to sell prepaid products first. Now, this bit is very important because if you're part of a larger company, your sales guy typically has 20 things on the truck they can sell. Your pricing model needs to work for them too, or you may struggle to meet your product revenue targets. Finally, sales is also a great input of market information. They can help you get competitive info about any new and emerging players in this space, or sometimes even expose you to alternatives to your solution. So, for example, if we take the data ingestion platform from our case study, we may find out that customers are currently using basic Hadoop clusters or data lakes, or even cobbling together open source offerings to achieve the same result. All of this is valuable information to think of when you set your entry level price. Finally, we have to remember that the clock is ticking. We will probably learn more by getting something simple and accurate enough out there rather than internally going back and forth on the perfect pricing approach. The goal should be to get your product out in the market, listen intently to customer feedback, and then iterate as fast as your businesses and teams allow. It is also important to convey this to major stakeholders too, so that they understand that you're playing the long game here. So to close out our customer case study, we could possibly settle on a platform as a service mechanism to satisfy customer expectations, but also fit it into a prepaid 1 and 3 year time frame to incentivize sales. Anything above and beyond could be reduced to a simple pay as you go. So to summarize, the goal of pricing and packaging for newer spaces, initially at least, should be to be simple and satisfy basic sales and customer expectations so that they spend most of their time understanding the new technology and its benefits rather than decoding complex price menus. This brings me to the end of my presentation. Hope you found this useful. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Have a great day and weekend ahead. Bye-bye.